Welcome back with a smiling face. Important note before starting, if you are a fan of audio stories, then our Patreon account is the best platform for you. Join us on Patreon for the best audiobooks ever. Coming Together Book 3. Episode 13. Chapter 29 to 38 of Book 3. When I surfaced to feel someone sitting beside me, I cracked open my eyes enough to catch a glimpse of brown skin and dark hair and reached out to push Antone away. "Hey," said a voice. "That's no way to treat your nurse." I pried open my eyes enough to see Rafe sitting on the edge of my bed. "Sorry," I said. "I thought you were." I looked past him to Antone, who was slouched in a chair across the room. He was awake, but his gaze was fixed on the wall, deep in thought. Yeah," Rafe murmured under his breath. "Don't blame you." I rubbed my eyes and looked around. Daylight glowed through the frosted glass window. Kenji walked over and nudged me. As I patted her, Antone noticed me and rose. "How are you?" he asked. It took a second to remember what had happened. When I did, I felt a burst of panic, until I wriggled my toes and saw them move under the sheets. I pulled my legs up and stretched my arms. Hurt, but everything seemed to be functioning. "Sore?" I said. "Yeah, you took a little tumble," Rafe said. "Little?" "Ah, so I fell onto the roof, not over the wall." "Thankfully," Antone said. "You'll have bruises, but Dr. Inglis assures me nothing is broken. Rafe's been trying to use his healing powers." Rafe looked abashed. "I don't think I have any yet. Maybe you can try yours." Antone shook his head. "A skinwalker can only heal others." He was right. I'd tried it on a few of my cuts and bumps during our adventures, and my powers had no effect. Antone handed me a glass of water. My mouth was cotton dry from the tranquilizers. I took it and started drinking. "You can rest some more," Antone said. "When you're ready, though, I need to call Mr. Nast and Dr. Inglis in to talk to you about what happened last night." "Take my statement." I glanced up around the ceiling. "I guess that means they couldn't watch the fun for themselves." "No, there aren't cameras in the bedrooms," he said, then mouthed, "just microphones." I knew that, from Rafe, but it was nice to have someone admit it. "Tell them I'm ready," I said. Antone shook his head. "Get some more rest." "No. Let's get this over with." Nicole was all right. I was. I would say I was glad to hear it, except that I was really only relieved because I didn't want to be responsible for her death, which isn't nearly as altruistic. Did that bother me? Intellectually, it did. Canada doesn't have the death penalty, and I agree with that. There was no part of me that wanted Nicole dead for killing Serena. Punished, yes. Locked up, yes. But her death wouldn't bring Serena back. She was fine, though. Bruised and battered, but fine. Had she been drugged? When I raised that possibility, Dr. Wiley acted like I was being paranoid. Nicole was unstable. That was all. Still, when I described how she'd behaved, the wild eyes, the inhuman strength, Dr. Inglis agreed she should be tested and promised to do it herself. I was relieved that no one tried to say Nicole's escape was an accident. Nast had already ordered a full investigation and all security personnel on duty last night had been put on a plane to Los Angeles to face questioning there. Near-death experience aside, I was still in trouble for trying to escape. I could have laughed at that. I think I might have. Nast did not appreciate it. Antone pointed out that, given that Nicole had almost killed me and I suspected someone in the house had engineered the attack, it made perfect sense for me to run. It was self-defense, really. And I had been about to turn myself in when I was shot. The other guard had confirmed that. Nast wasn't convinced. I would spend the rest of the day in isolation. No visitors other than authorized personnel. And Dr. Wiley needed to run another complete examination, because Nast was concerned that my attack on Nicole proved I was regressing. That really Antone off. I'd been fighting for my life and they were blaming me for hurting my attacker? I said nothing, because I remembered that blind rage. I was regressing, I was just afraid to admit it. If their tests discovered anything abnormal, no one told me. Dr. Wiley and Dr. Inglis didn't whisper any theories or suspicions for me to overhear. They didn't even give me hints with their expressions. Just ran the tests. Took the data. Escorted me back to my room. At least, Dr. Inglis did. I wanted to ask what she'd found. I wanted to ask a lot of things. If I was regressing, would Annie's treatment work on me? If they caught it soon enough, would they be able to fix it faster, too? If I asked, that would suggest I knew something was wrong, which would only earn me closer scrutiny. So I just walked in silence. Dr. Inglis didn't seem to notice she was too busy chattering at me. While she'd never been cold or standoffish, I swore she said more to me in 5 minutes than she would have in a year at Salmon Creek. It wasn't anything important. Just talk, overly bright, overly optimistic, overly flattering talk. Under the misguided impression, I guess, that I might put in a good word with Antone. Still, I could use allies, so I nodded and feigned interest. We seemed to take an overly complicated route back to my room. As we walked down a corridor, Dr. Inglis slowed and talked louder, and I wasn't surprised to catch a glimpse of Antone and Moreno through an open doorway, Antone sitting at a desk, Moreno perched on it, talking. Hearing us, Antone came to the door. All done? Yes, and I was just taking Maya to the kitchen for something to eat. A conspiratorial smile my way. And letting her avoid her room for as long as possible. Good plan. Antone walked out. I'll take Maya from here and grab us coffees on my way back. We need to go over a few memos. She hesitated, but it was clear he didn't want her accompanying us, so she reminded him she took her coffee black. When he said I know, she glowed. Before we left, Antone remembered something in his office and popped back in. I waited while he jotted a note on a piece of paper and dropped it into a file. As we walked, he asked how my exam went. He didn't seem to be listening, though, and when we turned the corner into another hall, he opened his hand and I saw the piece of paper that I thought he'd put in the file. He unfurled it and held it out for me to read. Dead zone coming up. He counted down on his other hand. 5, 4, 3, 2. Another couple of steps and he whispered, almost too low for me to hear. If you want to negotiate, we need leverage. You don't have that while you're in here. He motioned for me to keep quiet. I've arranged something. You'll know when it happens. You need to take advantage of it. At that point, I can't help. I need to stay clean. A stern look cut me off again and he counted down from 3 this time, then said, any requests for dinner? Since you're locked in your room, I'm sure we can make allowances. Take out, maybe? Just tell me what you'd like, and... He continued talking as we headed for the kitchen. I was going to get an opportunity to escape. To find Daniel and make sure he was all right, heal him if I could. Antone was setting it up, but once he did, he had to step back so he wasn't implicated in my escape. Or I think that's what he meant. I hoped it was. I also hoped I'd get some hints about what form this opportunity would take. An unlocked door? An ally who would break me out? And what about the others? But that was all Anton said. In fact, it was the last time I saw him all day. So I sat in my room, waiting for whatever. Nothing came. If he'd launched his opportunity, I'd missed it. Unless he meant tomorrow. Or the day after. I appreciated that he thought I was clever enough to need only those few cryptic sentences, but more detail would have been appreciated. 30. I don't think I got sleeping pills in my hot chocolate. I didn't need them, considering my ordeal the night before and the fact that I'd refused to nap all day, certain Anton's opportunity would come at any moment. I stayed up until nearly midnight, then drifted off, Kenji again curled on my bed. When I heard Kenji growl and opened my eyes to see my door swinging open, I jumped up out of bed and sprang into fighting stance. So did Kenji, snarling and planting herself in front of me. 2 armed guards stopped in mid-stride. "Control your dog," one said. He waved his gun to remind me what would happen if I didn't. "Why do they let her keep the mutt?" one muttered. "Like we don't have enough to deal with." "Calvin insists," the first said, and shared an eye roll with the second. Then he turned to me. "Grab your shoes, sweater, whatever else you need. You have 5 seconds. "Need for what?" I said, still sleep-dazed. "Grab it or leave it." 4 seconds. Anton. His opportunity. This was it. I'd gone to sleep wearing my clothing, just in case. So I only needed shoes, a sweater, and my stash of money. They hadn't noticed the cash when they brought me in, or they didn't care, so I took it now, shoved it into my pocket, and followed the 2 guards into the hall. When I stepped out, the noise hit me. Noise from everywhere, shouts and barked orders and running footfalls. The guards tried to steer me to the stairs, but I heard a voice behind me and turned to see Rafe breaking from his guards and jogging to join us. The whole house was in an uproar. All the bedroom doors were open, as if we were all being taken out. "What's going on?" I whispered to Rafe. "Evacuation," he said. "No idea why. This must be Anton's opportunity. Not just to get me out, but the others, too." That made sense. More leverage for negotiating. Still, as they led us downstairs, I kept looking for Anton. Just a glimpse of him so he could tell me, even with only a look, that this was his scheme. But he wasn't there. Nor was Moreno. Had he launched this, then found an excuse to be elsewhere, so he couldn't be blamed? Or did this have nothing to do with him? "Listen," Rafe whispered. I caught snatches of conversations in other rooms. Conversations about what was happening. Most of it was out of context. Then I heard Nast's voice behind a closed door and zeroed in on that. "Thought we had people working to prevent exactly this possibility," he was saying. "If we found out about the projects, so could the Cortezes. When they did, they'd want in, and that is a problem we do not want to deal with. People were supposed to be making sure we didn't need to deal with it. So tell me why we are dealing with it." "We don't know for certain it's the Cortezes, sir," a man's voice said. "That's just the information we received, so we're paying for unreliable sources." "No, sir, I just meant that it was a rumor. It might not be the Cortezes. It might not be anyone. Joseph Nast has ordered an evacuation to be safe. Because he doesn't trust my judgment." "Who went over my head to Joseph?" A pause. "His father wasn't notified, was he? I swear, if someone went all the way to Thomas on this." The voices faded as the guards hustled us through the house. So someone had told the Nasts that a rival cabal was planning to raid the house. Had Antone planted the rumor? If so, what good did it do us? As we were hurried out the front door, both Rafe and I scanned for an escape route, but the yard was filled with armed guards. Did Antone expect me to make a run for it? There was no chance of that. A minivan waited right at the end of the front steps. We were flanked by guards the whole 10 seconds it took to get us into the van. When I tried to lead Kenji in, the guard stopped me. "Driver's allergic. Your dog needs to go in the second vehicle. Can't you switch drivers?" Rafe said. "Kenji should stay with Maya. Or she can switch, got my orders. The girl goes here. The dog goes with the others." Who'd given him the orders? Antone? So he'd have a hostage to secure my return? Or because it would be harder to run with a dog in tow? As much as I loved Kenji, having her along in the city would be a problem. I whispered to her, asking her to go with the guard, then let him lead her to a second van behind ours. As we crawled in, the others came out the front door. Nicole was first. Her hands were tied behind her and she'd been blindfolded. She held her head high, the bruises on her pale neck obvious even through the tinted glass. Rafe took my hand as we watched her come down the steps. His grip loosened a little as they led her to the second van. Next came Sam. She was escorted to the same van. Annie and Haley came out together. Annie seemed disoriented, blinking as if she'd been sleeping. Haley was talking to her and she was nodding. Then they took Haley onto the rear van and brought Annie to ours. "Hey," Rafe said as she leaned in for a look. "Is everything okay?" She nodded. "Emergency treatment. I'm still a little fuzzy." She looked from me to Rafe, then turned to the guard. "Actually, can I switch with Haley? I know she hasn't had much time with Maya. I'm sure they'd like that." Rafe snorted a laugh, but before he could say anything, Annie said, "I don't think I belong in this van." She spoke slowly, her gaze locked with mine. Did she know something? Or was she just guessing that we'd try to escape? "I'm better off in the other one," she said. "The doctor is there to look after me." The guard started to say something. Then there was a commotion from the other vehicle. "I am not riding with a killer." Haley's voice traveled to us. "Shouldn't she have her own van? With padded walls?" "We'll switch," the guard said quickly. "Come on." Annie leaned in before she left. "I'll see you soon," she said to Rafe. Then to me, "Take care of him." "I will." It turned out we had a doctor, too. While Dr. Wiley went in the second van, we got Dr. Inglis. Other than the driver, she was our only guard. Well, the only one in the vehicle, that is. Another car swung out in front of us and I was sure it was full of big guys with guns. The second van pulled in behind, followed by another car of guards. Rafe was studying the situation, too, and not looking very happy about it. Haley just curled up in her seat, legs pulled under her, eyes closed. Great. She wasn't going to be any help at all. I tried prodding her awake, but she only grumbled sleepily and pushed me away. Rafe rolled his eyes, then discreetly gestured at the cars in front and behind. Even if Haley was awake or had some defensive power, it didn't look as if we were going to get a chance to escape. Was this really Antone's grand opportunity? If so, he'd given me far too much credit for ingenuity. "Are the Cortezes another cabal?" I asked Dr. Inglis. "Yes, they're one of the 4 North American cabals. There are the St. Clouds and the Nasts, then the Cortezes and the Boyds. The boits are the smallest. But the nests are the biggest, right? So why the emergency evacuation? While the nests are a larger organization, the Cortezes are widely considered. She glanced at the driver and cleared her throat. Some people consider them the most powerful. I wouldn't agree, but for both size and power, they come close enough to present a serious threat. And someone tipped off the nests that the Cortezes are launching a what? An attack? A mass kidnapping. We aren't sure what they have in mind, but it seemed wise to move you temporarily. While I'm sure we could handle the Cortezes, we certainly don't want you kids caught in supernatural crossfire. So the attack is supposed to come tonight? I said. Oh, no. The information was simply that the Cortezes have discovered the existence of the project and the location of the house. It would take them at least a day to mobilize. They're based in Miami. The driver murmured, but they have a Seattle office. Dr. Inglis looked over sharply. Do they? Well, it would just be a satellite office, ill-equipped for an operation of this size, and certainly none of the staff would have the authority to lead the incursion. Lucas Cortez lives in Portland. The driver shot a meaningful look Dr. Inglis's way. He is Benicio's heir. She fluttered her hands. Everyone knows that's just posturing. Benicio would never turn over the cabal to Lucas. Not when he does all that another disdainful flutter anti-cabal crusading nonsense. Maybe it's just Lucas, then, the driver said. He's found out about this and decided to get involved. Save the kids. His tone was sharp with sarcasm. He doesn't have the means to pull this off. Idealism is all well and fine, but it doesn't buy proper staff and equipment. She cast a glance out the window, and in her reflection I could see anxiety as she scanned the night. No, I'm sure he couldn't do this. Rafe looked at me and lifted his brows. He mouthed maybe. I agreed and mentally filed the information. I looked out my window. We were almost off the mountain now, in a densely populated neighborhood near the bottom. Lots of houses, mostly dark, the road quiet. Where are we being? I began. The squawk of a radio cut me off. The driver answered. We're being followed, said the woman on the other end. Could be nothing. I'm dispatching a backup car to handle it, but you need to follow protocol. The driver said he'd do that. He'd barely hung up when the lead car made a sudden, unsignaled left turn, tires screeching slightly. We followed. The van behind us didn't. Splitting up. Rafe said. Neither Dr. Inglis nor the driver answered. He kept both hands on the wheel, gaze straight forward. She watched out the side window. After a minute she said, There. The next street over. An SUV with its lights off is on a parallel course with us. I've seen them down 3 side streets now. As we passed the next intersection, the driver looked. So did I. There it was, a dark, unlit SUV a short block over. He called it in. Again, he was simply told to follow protocol. This time, that meant he was the one hitting his brakes and making a sharp left turn. The guard car continued on without us. Our driver flicked off our headlights. At the next corner, he turned again. Same with the next. Voices came over the radio. Conversations among the drivers. The second van hadn't noticed anything amiss and was continuing on with its escort. Our escort had gone after the SUV, which had taken off the second they appeared. They were chasing it now. We were advised to continue on, with the dispatcher giving directions that seemed to take us along every street in the neighborhood. Finally we came out on a back road in a housing development. The homes were unfinished and unoccupied, and looked like they'd been that way for a while and would continue to be that way for a while longer, another victim of the economic crunch. It was eerie seeing them in the darkness, half-completed skeletons, stark against the eye. I saw the truck at the last second. I don't know whether it came from behind a house or out of a garage. 1 second we were alone on that desolate road. The next I heard a motor roar and looked over to see only inky blackness. Then it seemed to appear from nothing, a huge black pickup, with its lights off, coming straight for us. Our driver swerved. The other one did, too, our front hitting their side with a crunch that threw me against my seat belt hard enough to knock the air from my lungs. The front airbags deployed. That's all I noticed in that first post-crash moment, the huge white bags billowing. The driver started clawing at his airbag. Haley vaulted from the back seat and grabbed his seat belt, yanking on it with all her weight to pin him as she wedged one foot into the gap to block him from hitting the release. As he struggled, she turned to me. "Do something. God, you guys can be useless sometimes." Rafe threw open the door. He looked first, but the truck was gone. He scrambled out. He yanked on the driver's door, but it seemed jammed. I squeezed into the gap between seats. The driver's dart gun had been propped beside him and was now on the floor at his feet. I glanced at Dr. Inglis. She was slumped forward as her bag deflated. I crawled to the gun, tugged it back, and managed to get out a dart. As Rafe raced around to try the passenger door, I jammed the dart into the driver's leg. I followed it with a second. Rafe got Dr. Inglis's door open as the driver stopped struggling. "She's out cold," Rafe said. He pressed his fingers to Dr. Inglis's neck. "Or worse." It can't matter," I said. "We only have a few minutes before they send someone. Time to move." 31. We'd barely gotten behind the nearest house before I caught the distant roar of a motor. "The truck coming back," Haley said. Rafe shook his head. "If whoever hit the van wanted us, they'd have stayed. Whatever's going on, it's not a kidnapping. If we're lucky, that's a random passerby. If we're not, we haven't been too lucky so far," I muttered. He nodded. "We should split up. It's easier for one person to hide and it triples our chance that someone will get away. If you do, go to Stanley Park," I said. I gave them directions to our camping spot. "Do you really think Corey and Daniel would still be there?" Haley said. "No, but I hope they'll check back or leave a note." We each picked a direction and ran. The vehicle I'd heard never materialized. I'd barely set out when I realized the engine was moving farther away. That didn't mean I headed back, though. The goal right now was simply to put distance between myself and the wreck. And hope Rafe and Haley were doing the same. I'd chosen backyards as my escape route. Easy enough, given that there weren't fences separating them. But it was too open. And piles of debris and construction holes made it far from a fast or safe choice. I raced down one street, ready to dart across when I heard the squeal of tires. I hesitated. From what I could see, the next row of houses was the last one, meaning if I could get there, I'd be out of the subdivision end. And what? Into an actual neighborhood, where people could spot me running through their yards. Or open ground, where I wouldn't have any shelter. I couldn't see what lay beyond the next road, which meant I couldn't take the chance. I needed to get a better look. I backed up to the nearest two-story house. It was less than half finished, with limited hiding places, but the two flanking it weren't any better. I picked my way through the debris to the front door or the opening where the door would be. There weren't any front steps, either, which put the doorway a meter off the ground. I grabbed the frame, swung in, and nearly fell straight into the basement. The framework for the floor hadn't been covered yet. Same for the wall studs. It was like being inside a house built of matchsticks. Absolutely no place to hide. Wonderful. Floorboards had been added to the second story, though, or part of it. I made my way up the risers that served as a temporary staircase. The interior walls weren't finished, but if I stayed on the floorboards, no one would see me from below. And I'd be gone before they brought in a full team to conduct a complete search. This was just a way station while I got a good look at the situation. Getting that good look meant checking every window until I found one that gave me a partial view of the street where we'd crashed. There was an SUV there now, lights on, doors opening, dark-garbed figures spilling out. I strained to listen and caught only the faintest murmur of voices, nearly drowned out by the crack and snap of tarps caught in the wind. I could see the tarps, too, ripped white flags of surrender dotting the abandoned houses. It was an eerie sight from up here, the rows of houses, the empty windows and doors like pits of darkness in blank faces. I moved to the other side of the house and looked out the way I'd been heading. It seemed like scrubland beyond the last street. Pretty open. Too open? It was hard to tell. When I heard a creak, I crept toward the stairwell, staying down on all fours and peering out from behind a partial wall. No one was there. I waited. Still nothing. As I turned to go back to my post, I caught what looked like a blur of motion, but when I spun, I saw nothing. My hands started to itch. I rubbed them hard and inhaled deep breaths. This really wasn't the time to shift. Or was it? I could move lower to the ground as a cat. I could climb and balance better, too. If someone came after me, I could disappear into one of these houses and be on the roof before they navigated across the first level. But they didn't need to get close to me to fire a dart. Earlier today, I'd had the foresight to change into the darkest clothing they'd provided, in case Antone's opportunity came knocking. In cat form, I'd be easy to spot with my tawny fur. So I needed to calm down before I shifted. Which was easy, because in contemplating which form was better, I had calmed down, and the process reversed. I chuckled to myself. Good thing I hadn't decided I wanted to shift. I crawled back to the open window frame and was rising to look out when a floorboard creaked behind me. I whirled and saw that same strange blur, now coming straight at me. I dived to the side. Hands grabbed my ankle. I wrenched and got my foot free. I scrambled to the side and started leaping up, but something hit my side. Not someone. Something, like an invisible force that sent me staggering. When I caught a glimpse of my attacker, I stumbled back in surprise. Dr. Inglis. I said. Your father entrusted me with your safety, she said. I'm not going back and telling him you got away. No, he. I stopped myself. If he hadn't told her he was behind this, I needed to protect him. He might not want me to come back, I said quickly. After what happened with Nicole, he didn't seem so convinced it was the right place for me. A flash of guilt crossed her face. Then her eyes narrowed and I felt a chill. I wanted to brush it off. This was Dr. Inglis. I'd known her all my life. She may have played a key role in the experiment, but she'd always seemed genuine about wanting to help us. What did he say? She asked. And nothing. It's just. I swallowed. It wasn't safe for me there. You saw that. I saw that you were having trouble, Maya. Serious trouble, however much your father wants to deny it. You're reverting. No, I'm stressed. Anxious. She shook her head. You forget how well I know you, Maya. You're strong and you're capable and you're one of the most level-headed young women I've ever met. If you haven't broken after everything that's happened, you're not going to break now. You're reverting. Deep down, you know that. If I let you leave, you could endanger your friends. What would that be like, finding Daniel, feeling relieved that he's alive, only to lose control and attack him? The first heat of anger washed through me. They all knew my weakness and they'd exploited every chance they got. How about Rafe? Dr. Inglis said. You could hurt him. Or your brother, Ashton. Or Corey or Haley. I'm not going to hurt anyone, I said, and charged her. I didn't plan to attack her. Just knock her out of my way. She didn't move. Just started saying something I didn't understand. When I was within striking distance, I froze, just like I had in the alley. It's called a binding spell, she said. Yes, I'm a witch. I tried to tell the Nasts that my sensing spell was good enough to find you, but they insisted on sending in their own witch. I am going to take you back to your father, Maya. He hasn't told me otherwise, so I can't be faulted for my efforts, can I? And I'm not about to let you slip away. As she spoke, I struggled against the spell. I knew why the Nasts had called in their own witch because Drive Inglis wasn't good enough. We'd faced off outside Salmon Creek, and she hadn't used her spell. Or she'd tried and it hadn't worked. Now, as I fought it, I felt one of my fingers move. Then another. Dr. Inglis continued, oblivious. You're my best work. You and Daniel. The others may catch up eventually, but for now you two are the shining examples of everything I promised the St. Clouds when we started Project Phoenix. As she spoke, a man appeared behind her. Just appeared. Like he'd been zapped there. I'm sure I wouldn't have been able to hide my shock if I'd had more control over my body. The beefy blonde man looked at me and smiled, then lifted a syringe and pointed at Drive Inglis, his other fingers going to his lips. She tensed, as if she'd sensed something. I managed to get my mouth open. Nicole, I said quickly, my voice muffled, jaw barely opening. You drugged her. That's why you offered to test her. To hide the fact that you drugged her and let her into my room to kill me. The man eased forward. No, Maya. I was listening in. I would have interfered if she hurt you, but I knew you'd save yourself. Dr. Inglis gave a faint smile. You always do. You'd save yourself and we'd prove Nicole was unstable, and make sure they took her far from you. Really? Because it sounded to me like they were planning to ship her out anyway. I think you did it to make sure they added more security to me. You knew I'd escape eventually if they didn't, so the man jabbed her with the syringe. She spun. The spell broke and I toppled as she started another incantation. I leaped to my feet and raced across the floor. I was almost to the stairs when a 2x4 came sailing from nowhere and cut me off at the knees. I fell on all fours. Before I could spring up again, a hand lifted me off my feet. I twisted to see another big man, this one with brown hair, holding me in midair. Behind him, Dr. Inglis lay on the floor, unconscious. The blonde man was bent over her, checking her pulse. I took a swing at my captor. He just held me out to arm's length and laughed. Claws in, little cat, he said, still grinning. Just like a cat, aren't you? Rescue you and get scratched for my trouble. His smile was genuine, his tone light, amused. I stopped struggling. Who are you? I asked. I'd say friends of your father, but that's not exactly true. Just a couple of half-demons with special skills for hire. He set me down but kept his hand wrapped in my shirt. You seem to have walked away from the accident all right. I hit you guys harder than I'd hoped. It's tough to plan stuff like that. His partner walked over. The dock's out cold. We'll just leave her here. So you're the ones. I struggled to form the words. My father hired. Now what? Now nothing, said the one holding me. This is what your daddy paid for, so now you're on your own, little cat. Except for this. He fished a wad of cash, a metal key, and a tiny voice recorder from his pocket. He slapped them into my hand. Top secret instructions. Listen, then eat the evidence. Thanks. I turned to the stairs. The brown-haired one called, not even going to ask for help getting away? You are an independent little cat, aren't you? No, I just don't think I could afford your fee. Even with this. I waved the bills. Now even the blonde guy chuckled. We'll get you to the city. If we spot one of your buddies, we'll give them a lift, too, but only if we see them on the way. The brown-haired man nodded. Can't get caught while we're cruising looking for strays. I tried to argue, but they were right. We left the house. The blonde guy explained that he would take me in the SUV he'd used to draw off attention, while his partner got the smashed truck to safety. On the way to the SUV, I caught the faint smell of Haley in the breeze. The half-demons let me go after her and bring her back. There was no sign of Rafe, though, and I didn't push for them to search. He might not be as street smart as Ash, but he'd been on the road with Annie for a couple of years, so he was capable of taking care of himself out here. 32. I let the half-demon drive us to North Vancouver. That meant we'd have a 5-kilometer hike to Stanley Park, but it was as close to our destination as I dared get. There was, I knew, always the possibility that this was a grand scheme to make me lead them to Daniel, Corey, and Ash. Given the complexity of the plan, I doubted it, but I was still being careful. The bigger risk was that these guys would decide they could make more money by turning us all over to the Nasts or the Cortezes. So the guy let us out in a North Vancouver strip mall, wished us well, and drove off. Haley and I pretended to head north. Once the tail lights vanished, we changed course, staying hidden behind and between stores in the commercial strip along the highway. As we walked, I explained more of what was going on. Then I took out the voice recorder and pressed play. Maya, Antone's voice began. This is. A hesitation, then Calvin. If you're listening to this, then you've gotten away and you've met the men I hired to facilitate that. I'm sorry if you were hoping for more assistance. I don't think you were, but I'm sorry all the same. I'm treading carefully here. If you do return to negotiate, I can't help if I'm being held in the Nast jails for treason. Return. Haley said. Negotiate? What's he talking about? I whispered that I'd explain later. Antone continued. Later on this tape, I'm going to tell you more about Project Genesis. You already know some of that. You asked me about Elizabeth Delaney the first time we spoke. You may have heard that a small group of those subjects escaped. That's not entirely true. They did, but they were found again a few months ago. The St. Clouds have been monitoring them. I've provided information on their whereabouts. You need to go to them and tell them that the St. Clouds are watching them. Then you need to convince them to turn themselves in. Seriously? Haley whispered. Is he nuts? I shushed her again. I told you that you need leverage to negotiate, Maya. So do they. Separately, you're just two groups on the run. Join forces and you will all have enough leverage to negotiate a return on your terms. A pause. That return will include the Delaney's. Another pause. Your parents. I know that's what you want and I know that's what you need. We'd all get our families back, he promised. Then he told us everything we needed to know to get to the Project Genesis kids. When the tape finished, I braced for Haley's outraged protests. Instead, she was quiet for at least a half-kilometer. Then she said, "Okay. So what are our other options?" "We run." "Run where?" "We'd need a goal, right? We can't just run forever. There's that guy they mentioned in the car. Lucas Cortez. We could go to Portland, find him, and see if he'd help. But his dad is CEO of another cabal. One that's at least as powerful as the Nasts. I'm getting the impression these cabals aren't exactly charitable organizations." Agreed. It's a possibility, though. Or we can find the Project Genesis group, tell them, and run with them. And then what? She sighed and shook her head. That's really what it comes down to, doesn't it? And then what? Calvin's right. We can't run forever. We don't want to. I want my mom and my dad and my sister back. And, yes, I want some kind of normal life back. I know that makes me sound like exactly what you'd expect a spoiled cheerleader, but it's what I want. Me too. She looked at me, surprised. I shrugged. I know that totally normal is out of the question. I don't think we ever had that anyway. But I want my parents and I want a life. Plus, we have medical issues, Annie's reversion, Corey's headaches, and possibly more we haven't found out yet. Then this really is our only option. It seems so. When we reached the park, I started getting anxious again, thinking about Daniel. Would he be here? How badly was he hurt? Had Rafe made it? Soon my hands started itching, my muscles bunching, my nails thickening. "You know, that could get really inconvenient," Haley said as I rubbed my hands and tried to refocus. "Tell me about it," I muttered. "Do you know what causes it?" "Stress. Fear. Anger. Right now, it's door number 1. My arms started throbbing. I rubbed them. Haley noticed and sighed. "Okay, change of subject. She stopped. Explain to me why we don't want you changing into a big cat." "What?" She gestured at my pulsing arms. "Why not let you change? You can move faster as a cougar. You can see in the dark better. You can sniff them out better." I stopped rubbing my arms. "You're right. Don't sound so shocked." When I protested, she cut me off. "In the van, did you really think I was taking a nap? I was faking it so they'd relax and maybe we could escape." "Oh. Yeah, oh." She rolled her eyes. "Go on and do your shape-shifting thing." As usual, I passed out to shift. When I got to my feet, I was still groggy enough that I let out a yowling squawk when a voice behind me said, "Wow." I twisted to see Rafe there. He crouched to eye level. "I didn't mean to startle you. I thought I heard voices earlier, so I jogged over and Haley said you were in here. She made me wait until she could be sure you weren't naked anymore." I chuffed. Yeah, I was disappointed, too. I rolled my eyes. He walked over and crouched again. Then he reached out and ran his fingers along the fur from my chin to my neck. "Wow," he said. "I am trying so hard not to be envious right now." I moved closer, rubbing against him, relieved he'd made it. Then Haley appeared. "Yeah, Yet, he said. I waited. She was decent. Although, technically, she's still naked. You're such a perv. She turned to me. Okay, kitty. Lead on. We'll try to keep up. Yeah, good luck with that, Rafe said. If she runs, we're history. 33. I meant to keep at their pace, but it was infuriating. The campsite was clear across the park. I could be there in a few minutes. I could know if the guys were there in a few minutes. I could know if Daniel was okay in a few minutes. Finally, Rafe told me to go off ahead. He could see me, and if they lost me, he'd shout. We'd found the right path already. It was overgrown in parts, with downed branches in others, not a popular route, but in cat form it seemed like an open highway, as I leaped over every obstacle with barely a hitch in my speed. Rafe had to call me once and I circled back at warp speed, heart racing with impatience until I heard him yell, "Gotcha! Go on," and I tore off again. I think he might have called again, but I pretended not to hear. I was almost there. I could easily return for them. I raced around the last bend so fast I missed seeing a rodent hole until the last second. My paw hit the edge of the hole and I stumbled. Pain ripped through my foreleg. I forced myself up and gingerly touched my paw down. A fresh stab of pain. I gritted my teeth, which doesn't really work that well in cat form, and limped forward. I was almost there. Just through these trees and the clearing was empty. I stopped and stood there, flanks heaving with panic. They weren't here. Their faint smell was at least a day old. Maybe 2, meaning they hadn't come back after Daniel got hit. I limped forward. Something rustled and I spun to see a burger wrapper caught in a bush. I went over, put my nose to it, and inhaled. It smelled like Corey. We hadn't eaten burgers before the memorial service. So he'd come back. But where was he now? And another smell hit me as I backed away. Copper. Blood. I stumbled to it and found dried blood seeped into the ground. The spot smelled like Daniel. Oh, God! Where was he? Had Corey taken him to a hospital? Please, Corey, tell me you took him to a hospital, no matter how much he argued. I took off, using my sore leg and not caring as I barreled through the thick brush, branches scraping and poking me until whoa. I looked over to see Corey down a path, his hands raised. Please tell me that's you, Maya. I hesitated, nose in the air, searching the breeze. Searching, searching. I caught it. I ripped around fast enough to send Corey scrambling for cover. I barreled past him and into another clearing, where I saw a blonde head bent over a fire pit, trying to get it started. As I raced toward the fire pit, Daniel looked up. He grinned. He didn't even look to see if the big cat bearing down on him bore my birthmark. He just opened his arms and let me race to tackle him, stopping and skidding at the last moment as I remembered he was hurt, but it was too late and I skidded right into him and knocked him over, and he only hugged me and laughed and whispered, "I knew you'd come back." "Yep, that's Maya," Corey said from behind us. Daniel gave me a bear hug as I wriggled like a kitten, my sore paw forgotten as I rubbed against him, inhaling his scent, letting my pounding heart slow. I snuffled him, trying to find where he was hurt, but he only laughed as if it tickled. I reached up and licked his face. He let out a sputtering laugh and fell back again. "I see you found them," a voice said. I looked over my shoulder to see Rafe and Haley walk out of the woods. Rafe's gaze was fixed on me, his expression cool, and I scrambled off Daniel as guilt darted through me. "Yep, she did," Daniel said, giving me one last pat before pushing to his feet. He walked over to Rafe and grasped his hand. Good to see you. Rafe looked abashed, then covered it with a forced grin. I took a deep breath to still my thumping heart again. When I relaxed, my paws started throbbing again, telling me the return shift was coming. I walked to Rafe, took the dangling leg of my jeans between my teeth and tugged him toward the woods. Do you want to take the clothes, or? He began. I let go and motioned to the forest. Ah, he said, grinning. Be back, guys. Time to offer moral support, apparently. He followed me into the forest. When we were out of sight of the others, he set my clothing on a log, then crouched in front of me. Okay, you do your thing. I won't look until you're decent. But if anyone asks? I totally looked. I licked his face. Yo. That stings. Like being kissed with sandpaper. He smiled, then walked to the log and sat with his back to me. I lowered myself to the ground, and almost as soon as I did I passed out, as if my body had just been waiting for its cue. When I woke, my arm felt better, as if it had only been temporarily twisted. I crept over, took my clothing, and dressed. Rafe stayed with his back turned until I sat down beside him. Fully dressed, he said. Sorry. Next time I'll leave my socks off. He laughed and got to his feet. Before we left, he pulled me into a kiss. Happy now, he murmured. I looked up at him. Very happy. Good. Now go do your healing mojo. Let's make sure he's okay. When Rafe and I stepped onto the path, there was a guy walking ahead of us. I saw the slim figure, the dark grey t-shirt, the chestnut brown hair, and I froze. Ash. He turned, and I raced down the path and threw my arms around his neck, hugging him as his armload of sticks jabbed me. I thought you'd left, I whispered. Why would I? He said, wriggling out of my embrace. Hey, Rafe said. You must be Maya's brother. I might know who you are. Ash turned to me. You okay? I nodded. The Nasts aren't going to mistreat potential future employees. He didn't ask how I got away. He knew he'd get the story eventually. As we stood there in silence, I rocked on my heels, resisting the urge to embrace him again. I could tell that would not be welcome. I'm really glad to see you here. I was sure you'd leave. Why? Because I was taken captive. And you were nearly taken captive. He snorted. I don't spook that easy. And if they took you, I'm not running away, not after you got yourself captured trying to protect me. A glare. Which was stupid. He didn't pause to let me reply. You needed my help, so I stayed. That's what I came here for, isn't it? Getting you out of this mess you've gotten yourself into. Gotten herself into. Rafe said. Well, thank you. I said to Ash. For staying. I turned to Rafe. Although he says he knows who you are, I'm still going to annoy him by being all polite about it. Rafe, this is my brother, Ash. Ash, this is Rafe. My boyfriend. Yeah, I figured that when I heard he was taking your clothes to you. You were around earlier. I said. He shrugged. Getting firewood. Didn't want to interfere with you and Daniel. A glower at Rafe. I'm going to strongly suggest you don't go with my sister next time she shifts. Got it? Yes, sir. Rafe's words were brittle, but Ash didn't seem to notice. Or didn't care. Just waved me back to the campsite. 34. Daniel was fine. Ash and Corey had been keeping a careful watch on him, ready to grab a taxi to the nearest hospital if he started coughing up blood or feeling sharp pains. The blood I'd found was from a nasty scrape on his arm that had opened up when Corey cleaned it. That was his worst injury. The driver had hit his brakes before impact. He'd knocked Daniel flying, but that was it. Bruises and scrapes, already scabbed over. I still used my healing on him, though. I don't know if it helped, but it made me feel better. While I worked on Daniel, the guys lit a fire. It was getting cold and they'd decided it was safe enough as long as they kept it small. Once that was going, I explained what happened with us. That took a lot longer than Daniel's story. First I told them about Sam, Annie, and Kenji and why they weren't with us. And Nick. Daniel said when I finished talking about the others. His face was drawn with worry. Is she okay? I took a deep breath. She's fine, and she's not fine. I don't know how to tell you this. Then I will, Haley cut in. Nicole. No, I said sharply, then softened my tone. Please. Let me. Rafe stood. Maya's right. The rest of us can find something else to do. Haley? Can you explain to Corey? Ash seemed unwilling to leave on Rafe's command, but at a whisper from Corey, he followed them out of the clearing. When they were gone, Daniel lowered his voice and said, If Nick's been hurt, you can tell me, Maya. I know you hoped there'd be something between us, but there isn't. And thank God for that. If you had started dating her when I pushed you to it. We're just friends, he continued. I'm going to be upset if she was hurt, but you didn't need to send them away. Corey's just as close to her as I am. It's not that. She's the experiments. Or I think it was the experiments, but I don't know for sure. Maybe it's just her. I saw his confusion, and I tried to think of a way to word it. When no ideas came, the words did, blurted. Nicole killed Serena. He didn't react. He just kept staring at me, blankly, as if processing. Then he said, Nicole drowned Serena. She's a Xana, like we figured. She swam out under the water and pulled Serena down. I thought of Serena, under the water, fighting for her life while I searched for her. How long had she struggled? How long had she been under there, and I could have saved her if only I'd found her, if only Daniel put his arms around me, pulling me against him as I shook and the tears started. I pulled back. I'm sure. I didn't ask if you were. I know, but it sounds crazy. I started suspecting her after she was captured. Sam said some things, and when I saw Nicole in the camp, things happened that I didn't tell you about. I had to be sure. Then, at the house there, she admitted it. Everyone knows. There isn't any question. Nicole killed Serena. Why? I took a deep breath. Because she was jealous that things came so easily to Serena. Nicole worked so hard on her grades and her singing and her swimming, and Serena did better than her without working at all. I know that sounds like a crazy reason to kill someone, but well, she is crazy. Did she do this? He asked, touching the side of my neck. I reached up to feel a faint scratch there. I hadn't noticed it before. I don't think anyone had. We had a fight, I said. She attacked you. He stopped my protest. I wouldn't blame you for going after her when she admitted to drowning Serena, but that's not like you. She attacked you. She tried to kill you. His hand tightened on my knee, mouth tightening, too. Again. She's not stable. I know. And I should care. Legally insane, that's what the verdict would be, and someone who plans to be a lawyer should understand that. But I don't care. She killed Serena. Her friend. Probably her best friend. After she tried to drown you, she mourned Serena with you and she pretended to be your friend. Then she tried to drown you again, crossing the channel. I don't care how crazy she is. I don't care if they fix her. His grip on my knee tightened even more. She had better never, ever come near you again, or... I must have winced as pain shot through my knee. He looked down and yanked his hand away, then swallowed, flexing his hand. I wouldn't hurt her, he said finally. Not if I didn't need to. But that doesn't mean I wouldn't want to. I don't care what that makes me. I put my arms around his neck and buried my face against his shoulder. I know. When the others came back, I told them about Antone. That was tough. How to explain that the guy we'd been running from had helped us escape? That he wanted to help us solve our problem? I focused on the role he'd played in our escape and how he'd championed us against the Nasts, to help Daniel and the others understand why I came to see him, however reluctantly, as an ally. I kept glancing over at Ash. He sat so far back that if he didn't have skinwalker hearing, I'd have thought he was ignoring the conversation. But he wasn't. I knew that. I wondered what he was thinking. What he was feeling. Abandoned by our mother. Sent away by the couple who'd taken him in. Repeatedly rejected by foster families. After that, you'd want to flip a middle finger to the world and say, I don't need anyone. But he'd still feel the longing, the bitterness at missing out on what should be a normal part of any kid's life: family. Then he discovers he has a father who seems to want him, really want him. Only he's playing for the bad guys, and even if he was on our side, could Ash ever trust anyone again? Wasn't it better, safer not to? When I finished, everyone went quiet. Then Daniel said, Antone wants you to go back, doesn't he? Voluntarily. I looked over at him. Daniel continued, I know he wasn't going to let you just walk away. If he cares about you, which he seems to, he knows we can't make a go of it out here. We could find our parents, but that only endangers them. You seem resigned to letting him have Kenji, which tells me it's temporary. As does the fact that Rafe doesn't seem too anxious about Annie. Believe me, I didn't leave her behind by choice, Rafe said. She figured out we were going to try escaping and they're helping her. I hate to admit that, but it's true. I'm not sure I would have chosen to leave if. A sidelong glance at me. It's okay, I murmured. You didn't have any choice, either. I knew what he was saying, that given the option, he might have stayed behind with Annie. Did that sting? Choosing his sister over me? No. I knew where his priorities lay. The point is that you're okay leaving her there for now, Daniel said. She needs their help. Corey needs it, too. Maybe we're all going to have side effects, serious ones. There must have been a look on my face, because he glanced at me sharply. Maya? Are you? Ash came out of the shadows, cutting him off. Go back? Did I hear that right? Not go back, I said. Negotiate a settlement? With the cabal? Are you all crazy? That's what I thought, Haley said. When you break it down, though, Daniel's right, it's our only real choice. I played the recording. Silence followed. Ash broke it. You get what he's doing here, don't you, Maya? He's using you to bring in these other subjects. You turn them in, like some kind of bounty hunter. He met my gaze, his eyes shuddered. I can't believe you'd do that. She's not, Haley said. Did you even listen to the tape? Calvin is telling us exactly where the Genesis subjects are because the Saint Clouds already know. So he's Calvin now. She met his glare with one of her own. That's his name, isn't it? Haley's right, Daniel said, his voice taking on his calming tone. By talking to them, we'll be warning them. Then we'd try to persuade them to join us in going back and negotiating. With the wrong cabal, Ash said. This Saint Clouds sold you guys to the Nasts. This Saint Clouds have your parents. This Saint Clouds own these Genesis kids, and this Saint Clouds are the ones who know where they are. You heard the tape, I said. Antone says the St. Clouds don't want our parents, they're just stuck with them. They can't exactly fob them off on the Nasts. As for the Genesis kids, their medical team is gone. Died in a fire at the lab. All except one doctor, who's with the kids now, and aunt. This Saint Clouds don't really want them back. For the right price, they'd let the Nasts take the Genesis kids and our parents off their hands. And then what? Then we prepare, Daniel said. We take their training. We take their medical care. We take their protection. We pretend we're going to grow up to work for them, and we use that to learn everything we can about them. Then we fight back, I said. Ash sputtered a laugh. Against a cabal? The biggest cabal? Yes. It won't be easy. It won't be soon. But we'll take our time. We'll grow into our powers. Then, one day, we get free of them. For good. The debate continued. It really was Ash against everyone else, which felt completely unfair. Finally he threw up his hands, muttered under his breath, and stalked off. Haley murmured to me when he was gone. Figures, doesn't it? The hotter the guy, the bigger the jerk. I'm not really seeing the first part, I said. Which is good. She grinned. All things considered. True. But, while Ash can be a jerk, I see his point on this one. Going back feels like throwing up a white flag. But it's negotiation, not surrender. And it's not permanent. It's like a covert operation. Using our heads. That's the plan, Daniel murmured. But I agree with Maya. I'd be more shocked if Ash agreed. I'll go talk to him. 35. I found Ash back by the old camp. He was sitting on the ground, legs pulled up, just staring into the forest. I approached slowly, making enough noise so I wouldn't startle him. When he looked over I said, getting used to it, "Hey." He lifted his brows. I waved around us. The forest. Right. Yeah. He gazed out again. Never really been in one this big. I know this isn't big for a forest, just. It's different. He paused. No people. I can see why you like it. It feels like home. He shrugged that off, making a face. Another moment of silence. If you've come to talk to me about this negotiating crap, I haven't. I sat down beside him. I just want to check in with you. I know this isn't the resolution you want, and I'm hoping you don't decide to cut out. He glanced over. Cut out. Take off. Leave. We're not at the point yet of making an absolute decision. So I'm hoping you'll stick around until we are. And then I'm hoping you'll give it more thought. Have I bolted yet? No, I'm just. Well, don't. He studied me for a moment, then said, voice lowered, I'm not our mother. I nodded. Another minute of silence. Then I said, he. Calvin. Antone. I sighed. I don't know what to call him. Just not Dad, I bet. I shook my head. No, never. Calvin, I guess. He told me what happened to you. What our mother did. He snorted. Yeah, I can just imagine his version. I told him what Antone said. He listened, then shrugged. Close enough, I guess. So what's he been doing? Sitting back and watching me. Looking for you. He'd get updates from one of the parents you were in contact with, one working both sides trading information between the St. Clouds and your contacts. He cursed at that. Really cursed. For a while. But that contact wouldn't tell Calvin where you were. I think he was trying to protect you. He met my gaze. He was protecting himself and his kid. Don't sugarcoat things for me, Maya. Ever. I'm sorry. I paused. Do you know anything about a guy named Lucas Cortez? Hey. He's the son. Oh, I know who he is. I'm just really hoping you aren't asking because the Cortezes are getting involved in this. Because if they are, we might as well throw in the towel now. 1 cabal is tough to outrun. 2. Near impossible, as you've noticed. 3. He shook his head. They aren't involved. But someone mentioned Lucas Cortez as a crusader against cabals. That might be a backup plan, if you know anything about him. I know he's the son of a cabal CEO. I know he's the supposed heir to the Cortez cabal. I know he used to be a crusader, until his brothers got murdered and he had to step up in the family business. Oh. Ash shrugged. Some say he's still helping supernaturals. Some say it's a front and he's luring them into the cabal. Cyril Mitchell believed he was still helping, but there's a reason he never went to him for help. Or to the interracial council that's supposed to help supernaturals. Because they can't fight the cabals on big things like this. If the cabals want us, they'll get us. That's the way it works in the world, Maya. The good guys have ideals, the bad guys have cash and firepower. You can guess which one wins in a real battle. I could tell he'd worked this through long before now, probably some cold and hungry night when he just couldn't take it anymore. He'd come to the conclusion that this Lucas guy and the council couldn't help. I agreed. The cabals had massive corporate and supernatural resources. Which was why we had to deal with them or spend our lives running. We need to get going, Ash said, standing. Can't take a chance they'll find a way to track you. We started to walk. So, this Rafe? Ash said. He's really your boyfriend. I looked over sharply. What does that mean? Nothing. Lot of guys. It gets confusing. Especially when you seem to hug all of them. I made a face at him. A few more steps. Then, he's a skinwalker, right? I nodded. That makes sense, I guess. This time, I didn't ask what he meant by that, just kept walking. Like I said, though, I don't want him following you off to shift. You need to be careful or he'll take advantage. Which he'd better not do while I'm around. I could say that I'd been successfully dating so far without a brother to watch out for me. But it was kind of sweet, in a misguided girls need a guy to look after them kind of way. He doesn't take advantage, I said. If he did, I wouldn't have let him come with me, if he did, I wouldn't be dating him. Good, Ash grunted. A few more steps. Is he shifting yet? Nope. Developmentally, the guys are all lagging behind. I shot him a grin. As usual. He rolled his eyes and muttered under his breath, and we continued on to the campsite. 36. The key the half-demons had given me was for a gym locker. We were at the gym when it opened that morning, Daniel and Ash sneaking in to retrieve the contents: fake IDs, real passports, tickets, and everything else we needed. Then we were off. One long plane ride took us across the country. A bus carried us over the border. A second bus deposited us, the next morning, in the small Pennsylvania town near where the Project Genesis subjects were hiding. According to Antone's message, we had a 10-mile walk. That didn't sound too bad to all the Canadian kids, who heard kilometers instead. The extra 6 kilometers were a lot when you were running on junk food and a few hours of sleep. Daniel suggested we try to get better food from a corner store before we left. When he asked for fruit, the clerk pointed to dusty cans of peaches. "We're not on the West Coast anymore," I murmured. "Thank God," Ash said, grabbing 2 chocolate bars in one hand and a Coke in the other. "There are protein and energy bars over here," Daniel said. "We'll get that, milk, and some juice." Ash stared at him, then at the rest of us as we headed for the milk and juice. "You guys aren't really teens, are you?" Ash said. "They've brainwashed you into miniature adults, full of responsibility and good eating habits. I'm surprised you haven't bought a." He noticed the toothbrush in my hand. "Seriously? Haven't used one of those in a while, hey?" Haley said. "Let me guess. You haven't been dating in a while, either." Newsflash, the two are not unconnected. He scowled at her. "I have one in my pack." He pointed to Rafe's toothbrush. "Have they infected you, too?" "Your sister gave it to me. I think it's a hint. Use it or keep my distance." Another scowl. "Better keep your distance anyway. We don't have time for that crap." Rafe was about to shoot something back when Daniel waved us to the register. "We're losing daylight, guys. Time to move." We were careful on the walk, though Antone had said not to worry about being spotted by the St. Clouds. They were only doing periodic spot checks on their wayward subjects. As for how they found them, a werewolf bounty hunter had tracked down the group a few months ago. That's when the St. Clouds had decided to let them stay on the run for a while. Wear them down until they were tired of hiding. It's not like they were going anywhere. Sure, after a few months in one place, they'd hit the road again, but they kept the same van, which now had a tracking device on it. "What types have we got again?" Ash asked as we hid in the forest behind the Genesis subject's farmhouse. "For the kids, werewolf, necromancer, witch, and sorcerer," I said. "For the adults, a sorcerer and a doctor with necromancer blood, but apparently no powers." "I'm guessing the werewolf explains the conveniently located forest." Daniel nodded. "He's also the biggest threat." Ash snorted. "Your average wolf is about 75 pounds. Even Maya could take him on in her cat form." Thanks," I said. "But you weren't paying attention to Antone's message, were you?" Considering how long it was, I don't think anyone was. The guy just goes on and on. "I see where you get it from." I made a face at him. "He said that werewolves in human form have the same extra sharp senses as skinwalkers, but they get super strength, too." Ash shrugged. "And we get agility. Ever seen a boxing match? Speed and agility win over brute strength." Daniel cut in, "How about we just avoid spooking them into a confrontation? Where's the fun in that?" Corey said. Daniel ignored him. "Okay, guys, let's get this rolling." It'll be less threatening if we show up in daylight. Corey, Rafe, and Ash are staying behind. Haley? You're coming with Maya and me. We could use your help. Oh. Haley perked up. What do you need me to do? Smile and look blonde, Ash said. Which you're good at. She scowled at him. Except the smiling part, he continued. You have some trouble with that. They want you because you're window dressing. Blonde, perky, and completely non-threatening. Daniel shook his head. Let's go. The place was a 2-story old farmhouse on a dirt road with no neighbors in sight. It was bordered on either side by fields and backed onto a forest. We went straight to the front door. I knocked. No one answered. I tried again and put my ear to the door, but it was quiet. Daniel walked out to the barn, which seemed to be used as a garage. Empty, he said after peering through the window. Seriously? Haley said. What did they do, go out for pizza? They've been on the run for months, I said. They'll be trying to live as normally as possible. Great. Now what? We wait in the forest, I said. We didn't dare leave a trail heading straight to the woods. Antone's note warned that the werewolf would be able to track us by smell, so he'd likely know strangers had visited his house. Better to lay a trail heading back to the road, as if we'd been just salespeople at the door. I'd found a tree earlier with a good sight line to the house. Rafe volunteered to watch with me. Ash insisted on joining us. When it was almost dark, I climbed down and conferred with Daniel at our temporary campsite. He wanted to give it another hour. We did. Still no sign of anyone. It's too late now, I said when I returned to Daniel. I say we wait until morning. Agreed. Though it may take all of my special persuasive powers to keep the troops from mutinying. He tried for a smile, but it was strained. Are you getting any sleep at all? I asked. I'm fine. He caught my look and some of the steel went out of his shoulders. Yeah, I'm tired. But I can rest soon. Tonight. He shrugged and gazed out at the forest. How are you doing otherwise? I asked. We haven't had much time to talk. We haven't had any time to talk. He paused and managed another wan smile. Sorry. Obviously we can't expect time alone right now. It's just. He rolled his shoulders and looked away. He was right, of course. It wasn't the time. But I didn't care. I wanted to be with him. Alone. We hadn't really had that since I'd escaped the nests, and I longed for it. Just a few minutes alone with him to talk, to relax. I felt guilty about it. Felt insufferably selfish. But it's what I wanted. Let's go talk now, I said. Rafe and Ash are standing watch. Corey and Haley are dozing. I looked around. I saw a stream that way. I say we be completely irresponsible and sneak off duty. At least for a few minutes. A more genuine smile. Sounds like a plan. We got about 5 steps when brush crackled behind us. Rafe stepped through. Hey, he said. Ash is getting antsy. Have we got a plan? Actually, Daniel and I were just. I trailed off. When I glanced at Rafe, I couldn't think up a good excuse to take off with Daniel, and I felt like we needed one. Call Ash down, I said. It's conference time. 37. No one was happy about spending another night in the woods. We were on the run, Ash said, so why wouldn't we come knocking in the middle of the night? He had a point, but my gut told me it was better to wait for daylight, and Daniel agreed. We found a place deep in the forest patch and settled in for the night. Before we did, I suggested we take turns patrolling and standing watch in hopes that would let Daniel get some rest. Even Haley agreed. We could see the toll this was taking on Daniel, when he was still recovering from his accident, and we really needed him in top shape for the next step of persuading these people to listen to us. Part of my plan, too, was to take first round, and that way, if Daniel still wanted to talk, he could slip out with me. Except Rafe offered to share my shift and I couldn't say much about that. We headed out to patrol so we wouldn't disturb the others. After we'd circled the campsite a few times, Rafe caught my hand and tugged me behind some bushes. "I think we're supposed to be standing guard," I said. Maybe, but that sounds like a token protest." His hands circled my waist. I hesitated, about to say it wasn't a token protest, that we had to be on guard in case the werewolf or anyone else came out here and found strangers sleeping in the forest. Even as I thought that, though, I felt silly. Paranoid. The forest was silent. There was nothing wrong with a brief break. God knows, a few days ago, I wouldn't even have thought of protesting. Just one look in Rafe's eyes and caution be damned. Another sign I was stressed and anxious, I guess. I kissed him and it only took a moment for me to lose that hesitation. His fingers moved against my bare skin where my shirt had lifted from my jeans. I eased back and looked up at him, smiling lazily, my eyes half closed, feeling drowsy and happy as his scent washed over me. "This is when it's perfect," he murmured. "When we're alone like this, when you kiss me like that, when you look at me this way. I see that and I don't have any doubts that this will work." I smiled wryly. "Oh, I have some doubts our plan will work. It's just a lot easier to forget them right now." "I don't mean," he cut himself off and nodded. "I think it's the best we can do. Doubts are expected." He bent and kissed me again and it was a strange kiss, one that kept picking up, then slowing down, like running uphill. I'd feel that heat, then he'd pull back a little. "Kiss me harder, deeper. Pull back." Finally he broke it off and stepped away so abruptly that my hands fell from his neck. "I didn't mean the plan, Maya. I meant us. Us." My heart picked up speed. "Doubts? What's wrong?" He took another step, and I wanted to pull him back, just say, "Whatever it is, forget it." But I just stood there, heart thumping. I don't want to be that guy. I really don't. "What guy?" I said. But I knew. I knew and I braced myself. "The guy who has a problem with his girlfriend hanging out with another boy." "I'm not like that, Maya. I don't get jealous unless there's a reason." "Is this about what Sam said? That story she told?" "She made that up too. I know she did." "Then why? Is it because I was worried about Daniel?" "No." "Yes." "No." A sharp shake of his head. "Getting jealous because you're worried about a friend who was hit by a car? What kind of jerk does that? I knew you'd be worried, I'd be concerned if you weren't worried. But when I'd see how worried you were, I'd feel." He let out a soft snarl and kicked the ground as he turned away. "I'd feel like a jerk. I want to be okay with your friendship. I really do. But little things keep piling up and I keep thinking about what Corey said, and I'm not okay with it." "What did Corey say?" I asked, my voice low, a spark of anger igniting in my gut. "If he implied there was ever anything between me and Daniel, it's not you. It's Daniel." "What?" He hesitated and seemed ready to brush it off, then backed up, putting more distance between us, cracking his knuckles. You and Serena drew straws to see who would ask Daniel to a dance a couple of years ago, right? Yes, but wait, who told you that? Only Serena and I had known about the game. She told Daniel. What? No. Why? You drew straws and you let her win. Whoa, wait. No. I never told her that I let, but you did, right? I paused. Yes, because she was crazy about him. And you weren't. He was just a friend. Exactly. Rafe nodded, as if it was what he expected. So why were we even having this conversation? Wait a second. Serena told Daniel that I let her win. He nodded. Why would she do that? Because she knew he'd only go to the dance with her if he knew you weren't asking him and that you weren't asking because you didn't want to. I don't understand. Don't you? Rafe's voice softened. Daniel wanted you to ask him to the dance. I don't know why he agreed to go with Serena. The obvious answer is that he hoped to make you jealous, but that doesn't sound like him. I think he agreed because they were friends and it would be rude not to. That sounds more like Daniel. No, my heart beat so fast my words came out breathy. It wasn't like that. Yeah, it was. He went to the dance with her because he felt he should. And maybe, a little bit, because you broke his heart. I looked up sharply. No. I never. Rafe held up his hands. Not on purpose. Corey said it wasn't like that. Daniel didn't go out with Serena because he was mad at you. He just... I don't know. Corey figures he was killing time, maybe trying to show you he'd be a good boyfriend, maybe even hoping you'd realize you did have feelings for him. Only you didn't. I thought of what Daniel had told me a few days ago, about his relationship with Serena. We were doing fine. But it wasn't going anywhere. When she first asked me to that dance, I didn't feel right saying no. She was a friend, and he'd stopped there. Just stopped and looked away. And you didn't want to ask me. No, it wasn't like that. Rafe was wrong. Corey told you this. I said. When did he tell you? Why would he tell you? It was at Salmon Creek, after you and I started getting together. He was trying to scare me off. If you dated summer guys, that was fine. But this didn't look like a summer thing and he wanted me to know, in no uncertain terms, that you were taken. I ignored him. Sure, I could tell Daniel liked you, but if he hadn't made a move, that was his problem. You snooze, you lose. I thought he couldn't have been serious about it or he'd do something. But then, when we were hanging outside that helicopter, and I saw his face, he was going to hold on to you even if it meant he fell out that door with us. Rafe shook his head, turned away, and took a few steps before stopping, his back still to me. I realized I hadn't seen things right. Daniel wasn't sitting on the sidelines because he wasn't sure how he felt about you. He was waiting. Waiting for a sign from you, because he was afraid to make a move and risk losing you as a friend. I felt bad for him because I was sure you didn't feel the same way. And then... He turned now, slowly. When I got back to Salmon Creek, it was just this whirlwind of stuff. You were so happy to see me that I couldn't doubt what you felt for me, especially after I confessed about being wired and it didn't make a difference. You wanted me. No doubt. When you insisted on telling Daniel about the wire, I told myself that was the right thing to do, as a friend. Nothing more. But it was like turning on a switch. A little tickling doubt, and now every time his name is mentioned or I see you two together, I'm watching for signs. And I'm seeing them. Something changed after that helicopter crash. I notice you two looking at each other, whispering together, and maybe whatever I'm seeing was always there, but I don't think it was like this. He took a deep breath and walked back toward me. I stood rooted, unable to move, much less speak. Rafe stopped right in front of me, then rested one hand on my waist. I need you to tell me I'm imagining things, Maya. What? I managed. He leaned in and a strand of hair fell forward on his cheek. I stared at that strand. I wanted to reach out and tuck it back, laugh, and tell him he was crazy. But I couldn't. Underneath the panic swirling through me was something harder. A tiny core of anger. Not just anger. Hurt. Confusion. Betrayal. Tell me I'm wrong, Maya. Tell me you feel absolutely nothing for Daniel except friendship. Or what? He blinked at my tone. We are getting ready for what could be the most important meeting of our lives, I said, brittle words snapping as I forced them out. I have spent the last few hours struggling not to run behind the nearest tree and puke. We have to pull this off or I might never see my parents again. And you decide we need to do this now? No, you decide I need to do this now. Forget everything else. My boyfriend is feeling jealous, so I need to reassure him. His eyes widened then. Sparks of panic. He said something, but I didn't catch it. Blood pounded in my ears. Right, Rafe was saying. It can wait. I never meant to talk about this now. He paused, then squared his shoulders. But at some point we do need to talk about it. He's in love with you, Maya. No, he's not. Yes, he is, and everyone knows it. Not just Corey. That's why Sam hates me. She thinks Daniel deserves what he wants, and what he wants is no, it is not. The words came out as a roar that had Rafe stumbling back. Tears filled my eyes, the forest shimmering through them. My chest tightened until I had to pant to breathe. Slowly I lifted my gaze to look at him. Why would you tell me this? He's my friend. My best friend. And now every time I look at him, I'm going to know he wants more, and... Quick breaths, gasping for air. And it'll never be the same. That's what you wanted, isn't it? To make sure that even if it is just friendship, it will end. A scent wafted past on the breeze. When I tried to catch it, it was already gone, but somehow it lingered in my brain and swirled with the anger and the hurt, and I felt my hands start to throb. I clenched them into fists. That's not what I want, Maya. I would never come between, you just did. I said. I have been through this past week. I thought I saw you die. I watched my parents at my funeral. I found out my entire life is a lie and I might never get any kind of normal one back. And do you know who got me through? The one person I can count on, always count on. Maybe you're jealous because that's not you, but as crazy as I am about you, there's someone who's been there a lot longer and that's who I needed. But you couldn't handle that, so you took it away. When I needed most, you yanked it away. I took off his bracelet and set it on a tree stump. He stared at it, then at me, and I saw the panic in his face. I saw regret, too, and shock, and I wanted to seize on that. He's sorry. He didn't mean it. He made a mistake. But all I could think about was Daniel, and what this meant and how I felt about it, and, oh God, how did I feel? And that smell. That tendril of scent that I couldn't catch, that made something in my gut throb and made my hands throb, and Rafe reached for me. I stumbled back, wheeled, and took one step away, and when I did, I took another, then another, starting to run, crashing through the forest, branches whipping me, running faster and faster, feeling my body shifting, screaming at me to stop, just stop, let it finish, but I kept going, Rafe behind me, yelling my name, spurring me on, until finally I tripped and blacked out before I even hit the ground. The rest of the audiobook will be continued in the next episode. Join us on Patreon for early access or more great audiobooks, a link is provided in the video description.